Well, I'm excited to have Laurie Canepa with us today. She's a partner with Austin, Texas-based Accountability Resources, which is an executive search firm. And she's been an executive search professional for over 14 years, experienced in the placement of exceptional accounting and finance professionals. And she's consistently been a top producer for the firm. And Accountability Resources has consistently been named a top contingency firm. And they have over 15 years experience in the Austin market, and they've been voted one of the #1 best places to work, as well as being on the Fast 50 list. On a personal note, she resides with her husband and her son in Round Rock, and he attends Round Rock Christian Academy, and she coaches his middle school soccer team, as well as the firm's charitable organization, Ignite a Dream. And she continues to play soccer herself, having been a player for over 38 years and playing at the collegiate level. So Laurie, thanks for joining us, and I'll let you take it from here. Go ahead and add your questions on the chat room for Laurie as she goes.
Great. Thank you, Craig. Good morning, Austin Job Seekers Network. Happy Monday. You know, as a recruiter, I'm asked a lot of questions, but I thought this was a really important topic because more often than not, when I'm talked to a candidate, they ask me why use a recruiter. Often that stems from either a poor experience or never having used a recruiter. So I thought this was a good one for anyone who's on the job seeker market, or even if you're a hiring manager. I thought I've had perspective on both. So I thought we'd kind of just jump right into this. We're going to go over benefits and advantages, myths, and how to choose a recruiter. So again, just lining things up, the first one's going to be the benefits of partnering with a recruiter. I like the term search professional, headhunter. I like search professional, but so we can jump right into that. It's the big benefits of partnering with a recruiter. You know, what's the value add? I get asked, like, what's the difference? Or what gives me the advantage, or what's the value that you bring to the table? I think the difference is, more often than not, when we work with a company, we are working directly with the hiring manager and the decision maker. Typically, when you submit a resume to a posting, often sometimes you're in a group of thousands, hundreds of resumes. We're working directly with the decision maker or the hiring manager, and recruiters often are really only presenting their top 3 to 5. So I think working with that gives you a huge advantage. Industry expert, you need to finding a recruiter that understands your background and where you come from and really can speak to the market, because that gives them the advantage to speak to your skill set, is really critical. And I think, and we'll go into that more about how to choose a recruiter, but I think that's really that gets you the advantage or separates you apart as a candidate. Getting an industry expert behind you and behind your skill set changes the game for you when your resume is in front of a hiring manager. A trusted consultant and advisor. This is a two-way street. As much as you trust your recruiter, they have to trust you. So this person isn't just a recruiter for you, they're a consultant and advisor. How to tweak your resume, how to interview, how to prepare for an interview, whether that's in the world of virtual and Zoom or whether that's in person, really giving you some constructive feedback, not just someone who's just throwing jobs in front of you. A good one that you will have, like I said, it's kind of a two-way street. This is a relationship, and they should also be your consultant, not just your job placement person. Access to exclusive searches. As a candidate, you won't know this, but often there are confidential searches here in Austin that will never get posted. They never make it to the job boards. So by working with a recruiter, it gives you access to those that you wouldn't normally see. Or exclusive searches. When we work on exclusive searches in particular, even though the job may be posted, internal HR and in recruiting isn't actually looking at those, because the hiring manager said, you know what, we're done. We're working exclusively with a recruiting firm. We're only looking at resumes from that particular recruiting firm. You don't know that as a candidate. So talking to a recruiter actually opens up the pool of jobs that you have access to versus just searching through the job boards. Market saturation prevention. This is huge. Austin's a small, big market, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in, you can easily saturate the market with your resume. And what I mean by that is by working with too many recruiters, not controlling your recruiter, which we'll talk about here shortly, really making sure that people know you're looking for a career and not just a job, And Austin's a small, big town. Everyone talks. When they see your resume coming across their desk like 15 times, if you don't know where your resume is floating, it's really important. And working with a recruiter who understands that you are really running to something and not running from something is really important. I have a lot of times worked with candidates that literally are great candidates, but aren't getting a call back from the company because the company doesn't understand why their resume has come across their desk 25 times. How does the candidate not know that? So a good recruiter is going to kind of walk you through on preventive measures on how we don't do that. And then closure. We talk about this all the time. I would love to say that every company here in town is going to give you lots of descriptive, constructive feedback. That's not always how it works. But our goal, a good recruiter's goal, is to at least get you some type of closure. I think we need closure not just in your job search, but in life. And whether that's good, bad, constructive, even if it's a few words, but a good recruiter's goal is to get you that, whether you were considered for the job, not consider why, is it something you could have done better, something you can improve upon. I know that for our firm, that's a huge target for us, is to not what they call ghosting, where you literally don't hear from the recruiter ever again. And we really make that a good recruiter is going to really make that their end goal, is to at least be able to kind of close off that loop for you so you can move on. I think that's the big thing, is just moving away from that, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. Recruiting agency myths. This is a really big one. Assumptions will always come back to haunt you, and a lot of my candidates assume that they understand how this works, or they've never worked with a recruiter, so they just go by what they hear. Big thing, recruiters take a cut of your salary. If you're working with a good, reputable recruiter, that is not how this works. Recruiters don't take a cut of your salary. That never comes into play. That recruiting firms only work individuals in temporary positions. That's not true. Most recruiters here in town usually have two types of teams, where they have a team that handles direct hire roles, and then they do have a team that does temporary. And unless you're going for, I'd say where you're going to find a lot of the temporary positions is more maybe the administrative level type jobs, and those firms are actually called staffing firms. And then maybe that's where you'll find more of the temporary roles. Recruiters don't care about job satisfaction. Not true. A good recruiter is going to take personal responsibility about where they're helping you find your next position. They really truly want to make sure they're putting you in a place that they feel good about, that they're being honest with you. They really do. That's why I stepped into this role, with the ability to help affect someone's life. But there's a flip side to that too, right? You have the ability to affect someone's life positively, but you also have the ability to affect someone's life negatively. And I think if you don't work with a recruiter who personally takes responsibility for that, I don't change how I am at work as I'm outside the office. I have a very do unto mentality. I treat people how I want to be treated. And I think that that's just an example of maybe a recruiter the kind of values you're looking for in a recruiter. A recruiter or recruiting firm is the only resource candidates need for their career search. As a recruiter, I would love to say yes, but that's not the case. Use the resources that you have at hand, especially in the world of COVID-19. You really want to be able to put, as much as you can out there. Basically working with a recruiting firm is just enhancing that already. It doesn't mean stop looking at job boards. It doesn't mean still talking to people that in the business, expanding your network. JSN is great for that, but that doesn't mean rely solely just on a recruiter. And whether it's in the market of COVID-19 or outside of that, just you're using a recruiter to enhance your job search. My offer will be less from the company that's hiring, because I'm working with a recruiter for their search. A good recruiter is not going to work with a company that ever brings that up. Companies are typically coming to you because they're saying, show me something you can't find that we can't find on our own. They know there's a value behind that. I've never had that happen if I even have any glimpse of that on the initial conversation with the company, I don't work with them. They already know what this looks like. They already know they're paying the fee. The fee doesn't come from the candidate. The fee comes from the client. So they understand that. So that never comes into play. And then there isn't a recruiting firm close to where I work or live. In the world of virtual and Zoom and Skype, we have that ability, but also I know for me, 95% of my candidates are typically working. I go to them, and good recruiters will do that. They know you're working. They know they're going to come to you. They have flexibility and adaptability. So don't rule out working with a good recruiter just because you pull up where their office is or where their office is located. No two recruiters are created equal. Who do I choose? That's a big question, because you really do need specific. First of all, I would not work in this market with more than probably 2 to 3. You work any more than that, and then you're going to get to that market saturation issue I talked about before, and you're getting into literally just tripping over each other. You really want to keep it to like your favorite, like 1 to 2, 2 to 3, maybe max, depending on how big your market space is. This is all about a trusted relationship. You need to find someone you trust. someone that you have a rapport with, who understands the importance of the confidentiality of your search and who has your best interest in mind. Completely critical. You know, there are people who are just looking to place you. You know, I had that done to me as a candidate here in Austin before I started recruiting. I worked with a recruiter who didn't care where he placed me. He just wanted to place me. And he was sending my resume out everywhere all over town as well. So I know specifically about the market saturation issue. Find an industry expert, do some homework, find someone that you actually look through the recruiters that actually play in your space or play in your function. That will give you a huge advantage because you get a recruiter behind you that actually can speak to your experience. It also gives you a really good comfort level that they understand your resume, that they're not just doing some keyword match on your resume as well. Client relationships and transparency, knowledge is key. Working with a recruiter who's more than an order taker and can paint a truthful and honest picture of the company, culture, players, and responsibilities of the role. As a recruiter, this is part of your job. Part of your job is to understand the client, the history, the company. Not every situation is perfect. Part of our job, part of a good recruiter's job is to provide you with that. You know, I would love to say every situation is, you know, perfect, but it's not always, especially in my role of accounting and finance. Sometimes it's a massive cleanup opportunity. And if it's an opportunity for you, some people love those kind of environments. But that kind of transparency on the front end, again, it's just about building that rapport and that trust in that relationship. Control and respect. This is a big one. You have to control your recruiter sometimes, not always, but sometimes with a recruiter, I would literally advise on the very first time you talk to a recruiter, lay the groundwork, literally lay the ground rules. Listen and advising them, I would love to work with you, but my resume should never go farther than your desk without my knowledge. You know, they need to understand that you're choosing to make a career change and that this is one of the major changes in your life, and the control of where and who your resume is presented to should always lie with you, the candidate. You would think that this is common sense, but it is not. So articulating that on the very first time you talk with the recruiter and letting them understand, I'm not giving you permission until until we've actually talked about the opportunity, I think is a very critical part of building that relationship and that rapport with the recruiter. References, if you're still on the fence, either you've had a poor experience with a recruiter or you're not really sure if you want to jump into this pond, ask for references. Good ones will have them. Candidates who they've worked with who are placed. Also, you know, you can do some kind of back channeling as well. Take the time to review the recruiter on LinkedIn, social media. You know, if a recruiter has been doing this for 15 years and has 2 references, maybe a red flag. Most recruiters actually have quite a bit of references, and you can actually look at those on LinkedIn if you're not really sure about pulling the trigger, talking to the recruiter first. And I guess my next question, I talk pretty fast. I kind of blew through this, but that's okay. It's a hard habit to break. I'm born and raised in the Northeast. But I guess my biggest thing, and where maybe I can add some value, is how would you rate your experience working with a recruiter? I think often I work with candidates who are resistant to working with a recruiter because they've had a poor experience or don't see the value or don't understand how this works. I'd love to know, you know, I'm definitely open for questions about, you know, what's your experience been working with a recruiter, positive, negative, why? Definitely open platform for any of those questions. So Craig, if there's anybody who has a really good question, I'd be more than happy to jump into any of those.
Great. Yeah, we did have one question, a couple of questions come in, but go ahead and add more to the chat room, more questions, and then this open discussion on your experience with recruiters. We had a question, can you speak to the need of a candidate to be focused in their search? What happens if someone is not focused on a specific, you know, job target?
You know, I mean, are they asking as far as like what are they a little unsure of where they want to go, or?
Yeah, well, a lot of people would just say, I'm a jack of all trades. Yeah. I can do lots of different things. How does the market and the companies respond to that?
Not well. So, you know, I mean, I think you have to figure out, and this is, I mean, a good recruiter, I'm always open for these conversations with my candidates. I also consider myself a career counselor to some extent. I actually enjoy that part of my job. Kind of walking through someone's thought process, like taking a look at their resume and their experience. And if they're kind of at a place of being, especially now, I'm getting so many calls from people just feel lost. First time they've been unemployed ever in their life, don't know which way to go, don't know which way to pivot. Don't know if I should be looking at industry. I need to work, but I don't just want to take a job. Like, what do I do? And so I've literally been giving my candidates homework, and especially my unemployed candidates, about, you know, do some, you know, if you have questions about where you are in your life and where you've made that. I mean, I made that huge pivot from being a controller and starting a public accounting and jumping into recruiting, which is sales on one side and working with candidates on the other. And how did I decide to do that? And it wasn't was an easy decision. But broader and jack of all trades, it gives clients and companies, it just confuses them that you don't know what you want. And I think hiring managers are looking to rule you out any which way, and that kind of, when you're broad, it shows them a high element of risk, and I think they want to know. And even if you're not sure exactly where you're headed, I think going into that interview, at least giving them understanding, it's okay to say you don't know. But I have candidates I've worked with that have like 18 different versions of their resumes. Austin is a small town, guys. People get your resume and then they get another version of your resume and then they get another one, and they're all different. And I will tell you, you get nixed for that, because they literally are like, okay, this person clearly doesn't know what they want to do. Why would we hire them for a staff accountant job when they applied to our financial analyst job? I mean, you have to do a little bit of soul searching. Like I said, for me with my candidates, I'm always up for the conversation of, okay, Laurie, I'm at a crossroads. I don't know which way I'm going, but here's where my head's at. What kind of roles do you think might be attractive for me based on what I've said? And that goes back to the industry expert part. If you find someone who's in your space, they're going to help you be able to coach you, because they've probably been through it themselves, or they definitely understand maybe where your skill set might translate best.
So they're actually recruiters are a source for informational interviewing when you're maybe trying to change or pivot
Yes.
to a different career.
Good ones anyways, good ones.
Okay. Are there any recruiters that specialize in like administrative assistants or executive assistants?
There are, and that's my firm is accounting and finance specific, but if anyone has questions about, I know a lot of the other recruiters here in town and the other recruiting firms that I feel really good about, I can refer you. I'm always about staying in my lane. I don't want to say I can be a resource for you if I'm a specialist in my field, but I know other specialists in their field. So anybody who's on this call, even if you're outside of accounting and finance, I usually know another recruiter that might specialize in your area, and I'd be more than happy to connect the two of you.
Okay. Does any company come to mind for administrative assistants?
It just depends on what level we're talking, because administrative assistant is a really broad title.
It's probably more executive assistant level.
Yeah, there is. I'm trying to think. I have to go back and look. Not off the top of my head.
Okay. Are there any what's the typical fee a recruiters charge?
It depends on your industry. I mean, it's a percentage of annual base salary. And it just depends on what industry you're in. Like there's an industry average for ours, and it just depends on what industry, but usually how they calculate it, it's a percentage of annual base salary. And then there's a guarantee that's behind each candidate. Candidates who don't always know this, but typically it's a 90-day guarantee. So there is a 90-day guarantee if anything was to happen, whether you leave on your own or whether the company was to terminate you or let you go, that ends up being, there's either a portion of the fee refunded or the entire fee refunded, and then that recruiting firm has the opportunity to replace you.
Okay. So you kind of cover functional areas, but you cover all industries.
I do, correct.
Okay. Are there more like industry related recruiters?
There are, definitely.
Okay. Is any particular ones come to mind?
There's a ton of recruiters. I probably know the more functional ones like myself, where it's more about the role, not the industry. We work with not-for-profits all the way up through large publicly traded companies. I can go back and do some digging on some lists.
Okay. Yeah, it might be helpful. Someone here says Bets focuses on sales and marketing roles. And they obviously work. You work for the company or for the candidate?
No. And that's a good point. If somebody is coming to you, and this happened in 2008, everybody, especially targeting the unemployed candidate, if a recruiting firm is coming to you and telling you that you need to be paying a fee, do not walk into that. There is a particular firm here in town that has changed their name 5 or 6 times. That is not the norm. That's not how this is. This is not how that works. I saw them do it in 2008. Like I said, if somebody's telling you you need to be paying them a fee, walk away. This is the fee should always be between the client and the recruiting firm. So the company is paying me. The candidate, this is a free resource. If someone's telling you otherwise, give me a call, because that is not how this works.
Okay. And someone's asking for a sales and business development recruiting firm. Is that something else that you might be able to provide?
Yeah, are we talking high? It depends on the level. Are we talking high level, like director or C-level? Is that C-level type?
Uh, yes, probably the higher level.
Yeah, I mean, there's some retained search firms here in town that do a lot of that, which is a different model than mine. Retained search means the client, it's the fee is still between the client or the company and the recruiting firm, but their structure of their fee is a little bit different. There's one here in town called Pedley Richard Associates. They've been around for, gosh, they were a mentor of mine when I first started doing this. They've been around for 30 plus years. They're not they're not function specific. They're not function or, well, they're more function specific. They're not industry specific. They're more level specific. So anything that's what I would say, like even some executive admin, higher level, they might do some of that as well. They're more director level and up, I would say, but they're kind of across boards. They have an incredible reputation here in town. It's 2 women and they're fantastic. If we're talking about working with good people, they are good people.
Okay. Someone says they're currently working on a PMP certification. Would it benefit to work with a recruiter now, or should I wait? They've never worked with a recruiter before.
I mean, in this world, I'd say just because working on a certification is great, and I would say start talking to your recruiter now, just because if you're applying for a job that requires, and this is the difference with a recruiter, if you're applying for a job that requires a PMP certification, you know, if you're talking to a recruiter, we can talk to the hiring manager, hey, listen, they're not quite there yet, but they're working on it. A lot of times you'll get the interview versus if you apply directly to the posting and don't actually have that certification yet, you might get ruled out because of that. When you have a recruiter that's saying, listen, you know, Jay Smith is working on their certification, they're in progress, they're a great candidate, here's all the other things. As long as you're working towards it, I'd say that that's still a really good, it's still a good idea to work with a recruiter.
Okay, someone's asking, how do they get in touch with you?
You have my contact information, right, Craig?
I'm sorry?
You have my contact information, right? My email address, my cell phone's probably best. You can always text me as well, email, cell phone, any of those work.
All right, go ahead and give them your email address right now.
Sure. It's Laurie. It's pretty simple. It's Laurie, Laurie, at accountabilityresources.com. My cell phone and the best way always to reach me is 512-569-5334. Texts or calls are fine.
Okay, great. Okay, some people are looking for healthcare related. Madeline, do you see anything out there, or any of our other panelists see any other questions out there to ask?
There's a few in the Q&A. One of them is, when working with a recruiter, is there a written agreement between the candidate and recruiter, or is it just a verbal agreement?
It's not, we don't have, I know some of the firms have that, but it's more of an application, not really an agreement. We don't have anything like this. It's really a verbal agreement up until the point of, you know, I'd say the only thing that candidates need to prepare for, I know when working with me, is you have to be able to provide your references, your professional references. If you can't provide your professional references to us as a candidate, we don't work with you. That's just kind of, you know, for us, it's just checking off the box, but we don't really have a formal application other than your name and, your where you live, your salary, your resume. I mean, your resume is kind of more of that, but there's no real formal application that we have. I know some of the larger ones have it's not an agreement. It's still just an application. It's not really an agreement.
Okay, Madeline, what else?
One thing that seems to be coming up pretty frequently is just how does someone go about finding recruiters that are appropriate for their particular career experience and direction? Is there a resource that they can go to find that, or?
You know, I don't know if there's a resource, I mean, other than doing, the traditional Google searches, but what I can do is this. So, and there might be some HR professionals on here or recruiters that are part of this. There is a fantastic Facebook group that is invite only, that is headed by the VP of People at Indeed. His name is Brian Cheney. And I'm part of this group because it's a great platform for this. When we have a candidate who's outside of our scope or something that we're not working on, I literally can put a message into this invite only Facebook group and say, listen, I have Laurie Canepa. She's not in my lane. She's looking for a really great marketing recruiter here in town. Who would you suggest or recommend? I mean, it's back to, Austin's that weird relationship driven community. And so a lot of this is kind of like by word of mouth, by networking, but that platform is a real good opportunity. So if someone needs a lead or a name on that, I can throw that in there and get them back some information. I don't know if there's per se a list. I've never seen a list out there, other than doing some searches and some, some Google searches.
Okay, great. Hey, if there's anybody on the call that would want to help Job Seekers Network develop a list of industry-specific or functional recruiters, let me know if you want to volunteer for that. Because that is something that, I could see that could help many job seekers going forward. Okay, what other questions do we have?
And I think to that point too, Craig, when you're looking for recruiters that are Austin based, Austin is an attractive place to do business. You want to work with somebody here who's been in this market for a while. A lot of recruiting firms, especially some of the global ones, try to just throw one person in Austin and try to create some type of, because they know Austin, we're, prior to COVID, we were one of the top marketplaces as far as, our unemployment rate percentage being probably one of the smallest in the United States, probably one of the healthiest job markets. So make sure you're looking for a recruiter that has some historical knowledge or has some experience working in Austin, because that is huge. That's Austin. We're back to my point before, we're still a small, big town, and this is a very relationship-driven industry. I wouldn't say that if we were in Dallas or Houston, but we're not. We're in Austin, and I would say, so if you're looking to see a recruiter that's only been on the ground here, like for a year or a month, and doesn't really have that support behind them, that's not going to necessarily going to be able to help you to get you in front of the right people.
Okay. Tell me about references. You mentioned that you want job seekers to get references.
We do.
Sometimes tell us a good strategy or tips for getting that, because sometimes a job seeker was let go. They're not sure if they're rehirable by that company, and what companies actually share. If somebody calls a company,
right,
and asks for a reference, what they actually share. But how would you advise a job seeker to go get references?
Well, I think references don't always have to be from your most recent job, right? I think that's what we have to remember. I think most of the people in this group are probably seasoned professionals. That doesn't mean you have to get me a reference from your last job. You've had references to jobs prior to that. Everyone's gone through it. We talk with our candidates about the situation. Walk me through what happened. This is back to the trust and relationship that you have with a recruiter. Everything I tell my candidates all the time, everything I talk to you about is confidential, stays between you and I. So walk me through a situation, walk me through what happened, and, be honest with me. Are you eligible for rehire? That doesn't mean that I wouldn't present you somewhere. We just need to kind of talk through what that looks like. But candidates should have references. Doesn't mean it needs to be from their most recent situation, but it could be from a situation before that. And how references work for me, especially for confidential job seekers, I don't check references until we get to a point in time where we decide that we're actually going to present your resume to. We want to protect the confidentiality of your search at all. And we don't want, the least people that know about your search, the better. So we get them on file on the front end, because this is back to that give and take. I need to see some effort on your side of, hey, I have good references that can speak to my experience. Maybe I've had a hiccup in this last situation, but here's some references from my prior jobs that can speak to my experience. But I really don't want companies calling them every 2 minutes and you calling them. So how does that work? So for us, we want to have them on file, but I don't do anything with them until we decide to actually present your resume to a company. And I always do that with the candidate's knowledge. We don't reach out to our candidates' references without letting them know that we're doing that. That way, in case the candidate's like, hey, I don't really know if it's the right time, or I don't really know if I'm comfortable with that, we can talk through that again.
Did we just lose Laurie?
No, I'm right here.
Okay. Do you work with TRS, ERS, or TMRS? I don't know what those are. Texas Retirement.
I think that's Teachers Retirement System. Is that right? And then I think the other ones. We don't work with a ton of governmental entities. We don't. It's a pretty large process to go. You have to it's a long story, but you have to go. You got to bid on. It's like any governmental entity. Unless they've reached out to us to ask us, it's kind of, you have to go through a bidding process, and it's just a lot for us as a small firm. Some of the larger ones might, we don't. Some of the larger ones might, we don't.
Okay. Well, one of our job seekers, Nick Daw, who you know, Laurie, has offered to help build an Austin recruiter list. So instead of maybe everybody reaching out I'll have Nick maybe reach out to you, and I'll work with Nick as well. So Nick, thank you for offering to do that. And if you have recruiter names that you've worked with and been happy with, go ahead and send them over to us at Job Seekers Network, info@job-seekers-network.org. We have a job seeker who you said in the first half of their career they worked as financial planning, analysis, reporting, and systems projects. They've been in business intelligence, data analysis, and systems roles in the latter half.
Mm-hmm.
How would you propose to make the transition back to the financial area?
I mean, you basically have a tech savvy FP&A or financial planning person, which is actually huge. It's actually not as much of a stretch as you would think, because a lot of times I would say a lot of my clients actually complain that their FP&A or financial planning people aren't tech savvy enough. So this person has started their core out in FP&A, but moved over to BI. And BI is actually really someone who's super tech savvy. We just have to walk through. I think companies would think that would be attractive. That would be actually a plus. It wouldn't be as far of a stretch as you think.
Okay. We've got a question on the state government recruiting, and I'd say Peak Performers is the one that we work with.
Yes.
So you can go to Peak Performers to work with that one. Got someone who is changing from a low-tech food manufacturer to maybe high-tech software. Will recruiters help make that change if they like been a sales director for a low tech company, wants to go high tech? Is that a hard change to make?
I mean, you really have to dig into where, companies are looking to where you're going to add value from day one. You have to remember that, right? So you have to see if there's any crossover between when they say low tech to high tech. I mean, what do they mean by low tech? Do they know the industry? What kind of industry you're talking?
Software, from food manufacturer to software.
Yeah, you can make the transition. You might have to take a couple steps backward to move forward. And maybe if they're coming in and looking for, if they're at a higher level role, maybe coming in at like more of a, just because it's an industry that's not the norm for you. And we work a lot in food manufacturing and consumer products or CPG. And between that and technology are definitely different a lot, even from a culture perspective. So I think that's something else this person would have to ask themselves is, the culture that I'm used to versus the culture with a high-tech company. But if they're looking to make that change, we'd have to go back and look and see where's there some crossover, even though they're different industries, where has there been some crossover in what I might bring to the table to a software technology? And am I open to, for the right opportunity, am I open to taking a couple steps backward to move forward? I think you might just kind of have to talk through that, because I think that might be something they would need to be open to.
Okay, how about working with more than one staffing firm? Seems like when they go to another one, they ask, hey, have you been working with another staffing firm, or where have you already applied to?
Right.
And the candidate's kind of reluctant to share that. What do you think about that situation?
So I think it was back to what I talked about before. You don't really want to work with more than 2 to 3. They're asking you that because how this works is this. It's about who presents your resume first. It's who has first point of contact of your resume, whether you apply or own or through another recruiter. So if I'm talking to you about a job and I put you in front of a company, and then you work with another recruiter and they ask you about the same company, you're going to want to tell them, Laurie already presented me at Accountability Resources. It does not help you by having your resume submitted twice. And the other recruiter is not going to be happy with you either, because it doesn't look positively upon them as well. Now, sharing information is another thing. I mean, I ask my candidates, especially when we get exclusive searches, when I know that we're the only recruiting firm, or a confidential search, I ask them, to protect the confidentiality of the search, please don't share with another recruiting firm, because honestly, you're only increasing your own competition. And we're also jeopardizing the confidentiality of the search. But when it's a job that's posted that multiple agencies are working on, you're going to want to tell the other recruiter, just so they're not presenting your resume when your resume is already presented or you already directly applied. Which, to my next point, if you've already directly applied to a company, how this works is it's not based on the position, it's based on the company. So if you're working with a recruiter and they ask you, hey, I'm working on a job with applied materials for a financial analyst role, and you're like, well, I applied to applied materials, but was for a staff accountant job. It doesn't matter. Your resume is already in your database. So it's not based on the position. It's based on the first time that company has had interaction or contact with your resume. And that goes the same with recruiters. The recruiter who owns your resume or is representing you is the first person that presents you. And it doesn't help you by having another recruiter double it. You don't have a better chance of getting the job because you have 3 recruiters presenting your resume.
Okay. And what are you finding are you finding a mixed bag on your clients you represent, that some have put things on hold, some are continuing, but doing things virtually, and then some are just hiring for their most critical positions only? What are you seeing on your clients?
I would say out of all the jobs we have, 50% are on hold. I'd say that, the other 50%, they're still it just depends on the business or the industry they're in, and then whether they were set up for technology, in a virtual world. We have a couple companies that are actually, these are kind of my tougher searches because they're essential businesses, which means I actually need someone to go into the office. Even though they've provided an environment that has, separation and all those kind of things, depending upon your personal situation, not everybody's going to be interested in that. Yet this company is an essential business. So you actually have to be in the office. Ours are more industry related. I would say, some of the roles that we have that we're still working on, director of internal audit. I've got an assistant controller job in revenue. Like I said, we have a lot of healthcare for obvious reasons. The bigger companies or the companies that were set up virtually already had a better chance of just moving. It was just a logistics move. I'd say the companies that are having a tougher time, it's not really based on size. It's based on what their infrastructure looked like from the ability to work remote. If they didn't have it prior to COVID, they're having a hard time. So we kind of have half, but I will tell you this, every day seems to be getting a little bit better. I see one more company call me or one more company reopen a position. A lot of companies are going the route. And I would say if you're a candidate who's unemployed and maybe temporary or contract work is not your favorite, but a lot of companies, it happened in 2008. I can already see it happening in 2020, are starting to move to that where they have a position, they have a need, but they're not sure. I don't think any of us are sure whether this is going to be over in 3 months, 6 months. Like, no one has a crystal ball. We can just deal with what's right in front of us. So what they're doing is they're going with a cost they can control. So the cost that they control is by bringing you in at an hourly rate and a weekly rate, and they know exactly what Craig Foster what's he going to cost me for the week? Well, that's a cost I can control. Maybe I need him for 2 weeks. Maybe I need him for 3 weeks. Maybe I can only afford him for 4 weeks. So I know it's not an option that everyone loves, especially if you've never worked a contract or a temporary job in your life, but it is something to think about because I can already see companies switching to that gear because it's something that they can control, especially with the PPP that came out. They have 8 weeks of retaining employees. They want to pay their existing employees, but they still need to add headcount. So how does that work? So when you work when you work as a contractor or a temporary person, you're actually not their employee, you're the recruiter's employee. So they can actually add headcount. Well, they can actually add people and to come and help out with the work, but without actually adding any headcount. So something to just stay open-minded to. I know not everyone loves it, especially if you've never taken a contract or temporary job, but that is where I've seen some of our roles kind of move towards that because people just aren't really sure where this is going, and they don't want to make a commitment to someone that they can't stick to. So they don't want to bring you in at a full-time salary and benefits and then have to let you go in 3 to 6 months because this hasn't turned the corner that they thought it would for their industry. So just something to think about. I think keeping your options open, especially if you're not working right now, is just always a good idea.
Okay, great. We put some resources in the chat room, a couple of different recruiter lists that we have ran across. And Laurie, you're on one of those. February 2020, Built in Austin put out a list with you and Will Thompson.
Yes, love Will. Will and I partner on a lot of things together. So Will's fantastic. Yes.
Cool. What's my expectation as a job seeker of getting career coaching from a recruiter?
I mean, as far as career coaching, as far as where you're going, I mean, I wouldn't say the recruiter, I wouldn't rely on them 100% for career coaching. I think there's some fantastic career coaches that are much well-versed in this. I think what a recruiter can do for you is take what's on paper, listen to kind of where you want to go, and then can kind of give you their ideas. But if you're really soul searching about what do I want to do in my life and what fits into my life, because we talk about work-life balance all the time, and there, work-life balance means different things to different people. I think there's some really good career coaches here in town that are probably better positioned for that and that can spend the time with you. You know, recruiter you'll get a glimpse of that, and you want a recruiter who does care about that part of you, but their ultimate point is to actually help you tie you to a job and get you working again or get you into that next better career. So you should get that from a recruiter, but there's some other career coaches that are 100% focused on this that I think if you're really looking for that, if you're literally like, I don't know what I want to do with my life and I don't know how to use the experience that I have, this is where I'm in my life. Like, I think a really good career coach, there's a value. I think that would having a recruiter and a career coach, I think are two good. I think they're two different types of people.
Great, good distinction there. Should a job seeker work with more than one recruiter, or should they kind of focus on one industry specific recruiter?
I mean, like I mentioned before, I think 2 to 3 is probably your max in Austin, because otherwise they're going to be tripping over each other. I would love to say every recruiting firm here in town does what I told you about before. There's no code of ethics or recruiting or integrity in the recruiting world. I wish there was. I came from a world where we were guided by certain technical accounting gap lines and code of ethics, and there's not in recruiting. So each recruiting firm has to determine how they want to operate. There are recruiters out there that will submit your resume without asking you first. There are recruiters that will send your resume without even talking to you first. So you need to really vet that on the front end. And really, I would not work with more than 2 to 3. I really wouldn't.
Okay. Well, Laurie, that's all we have time for today.
Great.
I really appreciate you joining us. Again, we're going to be sending you these resources that we have in your weekly email from Job Seekers Network that typically goes out on Thursday morning. And so look for those, and we'll work with Nick to expand that list with your help. And so thank you very much, Laurie, for joining us.
No, thank you. I'm so glad that Will's actually the one that referred me into this organization, and being such a faith-based woman, a woman of faith, I love the fact that I can take my career and translate it to something else too. This is, I love that you're allowing me to be a part of this. I really do. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.